So I still think AI, text generation, has a huge place in time savings, but it has to be driven by an educated operator is where I'm coming down on. I use it all the time. I feel like it saves me hours, and I try to make it really short, really readable, and it's saving me the time of actually having to manually draft it. That's how I use it. Chris, have you been using it at all or not really?
Not one bit.
Welcome to episode 95 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is November 7th, 2025. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm, and your host. I'm joined by Chris Heald, who's our supervising attorney at the firm and my co-host. Chris, I've got a quote from a prospective applicant to one of our attorney jobs who doesn't have a bar license, who's applying for the job. Now, technically what's happening is Indeed has this AI matching service. And for whatever reason, Indeed's AI matching service keeps matching her, even though she doesn't have a bar license. And we keep inviting her to apply, not really analyzing the resume and not realizing she doesn't have a bar license. So on the second time we invited her, this is how she replied: "Then why do you keep sending me solicitations? It is cruel in this job market for someone who really needs a job." What do you think about that, Chris?
Are we personally sending them, or is it some AI that does it?
No, the AI matches. We don't exactly have enough time to fully read every resume. And then the candidate is 15 more times likely to apply to our job if you hit the invite button, right? But it would be really laborious if you're inviting 30 people a day to read every little resume. Do they have a bar license? Because the job says they have to have a bar license to be an attorney, but there are people that are getting run or taking the bar or transitioning from another state. So we've apparently solicited or hit the invite button twice. And that was her last message to us.
Yeah, I can understand the frustration. If you're looking for a job, that feels pretty cruel. I can understand her not appreciating that.
Okay.
Is she sitting for the bar? Is that the issue?
No, she's licensed in another state and she's trying to transfer into Texas and she's just waiting on that. I thought about it, hey, if you really want a job so bad, come and I've got some work you can do under me as my legal assistant. You've got to sit with me in a virtual room for 8 hours a day and do what I tell you. Do you want the job that bad? So it's pretty rough.
That sounds rough.
All right, let's talk about what's on our docket today. Legal questions. How much does it cost to review a commercial sales contract? What does title insurance cover and do I need it? And how is it different from casualty insurance? So we'll be talking about those on our legal question section. And then we've got a rant and rave. The rant and rave section is called AI generated emails from clients. Love them, hate them, or just neutral on them. So I'll let you opine on that, Chris.
Hate them.
Let's get it kicked. I knew that was coming. Let's get it kicked off with our legal question section, since we don't really have a legal news section today. So let's get it kicked off with our legal question section. How much does it cost to review a commercial sales contract? So, Chris, the question I always ask is the property under a couple $1 million, and does it say TAR on it? And that's the 12 or 13 page form. And if the answer to that is yes, I generally quote them about $1,500 and figure out it's 4 or 5 or 4 hours of work, something like that, to review, revise, and make edits. If it's the other kind, which attorneys have a penchant for making things complicated, you get these 40-page custom contracts and there's no real form out there, and all attorneys have their own favorite form, hundreds, maybe thousands of forms out there. So you have to read 40 pages and do red line review. And if it's a complex deal and maybe it's more than a couple $1 million, I might estimate $2,500 to $5,000. Chris, what do you think? You like it? Any differences in opinion on that? Or?
I think it's more than that, but Yeah.
I knew you would.
If you're my perspective, and as we charge very fair and reasonable rates, but if you're spending $10 million on a property, if you can't spend 10,000 on the attorney to make sure that, hate to overuse the term, that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, but that's where you don't want to drop the ball. You've done all this research to find the property. You've done your work on figuring out the valuation. You don't want to cut corners at the end and miss something or have something in the contract that's going to come back to bite you later. Nobody thinks deals are going to go south, but sometimes they do. So paying the money on the front end, even though you don't expect your deal to go south, but to make sure you've got protection on the back end is very much worth it. And going back and forth with these commercial real estate developers and big time sellers can be pretty time intensive. And they're going to have their playbook and they're going to come to war. They're not going to be like, hey, Chris, buddy, how can I help you? They're there to protect their client. So it's not just, hi, friend, how are you? Let's talk about some business.
Yeah. Sometimes I explain it to them. Even sometimes people will bring me like a 10, 15, $20 million deal on the TAR form. And even though if it were $1 million or $2 million, I might only charge them $1,500. But if they're bringing me a really big deal on a TAR form, I will tell them it's $5,000 and our hourly rates go up for that kind of project. And I'm very candid that I explain that there's a huge amount of risk because they're sophisticated people and I get it. They're like, it's the same amount of time. So why can't you just charge me your normal rate and your normal cost? But my response is our malpractice policy only goes up to $1 million per claim, $2 million, I think, for the year or whatever. But so you're asking me to review a $10, $20 million deal. There's a lot of risk in that. So I've got to be compensated for the risk is what the issue is.
Yeah. When they're saying, oh, can't you just take a look? That's when they're your friend and they're saying, hey, I need an attorney. Can you just help me out? If they get sued in 5 years, they're not calling you or me and saying, hey, buddy, can you just take a look at this? They're calling and saying, how did you miss this? You screwed this up. So we know that. And so we can't take it lightheartedly when you call us on the phone the first time and say, hi, can you look at my contract? Because I know what could happen in 5 years. So yes, I want to work for you. Yes, I want to be your buddy, but I also don't want you calling me in 2 years saying, how could you miss this? I've just lost $8 million. That's the end of the phone I don't want to be on.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And everyone's friends until we're not friends. And if as attorneys, if we do miss something, I can promise you on a big deal like that, we are getting sued. So we have to do the due diligence, not just to protect ourselves, but also to give the client a good service. It's a little different if you live in a really nice house and you hire a trade to come out. Let's say you need new counters and you live in a $5 million house and the trade guy comes out. He's all right. That will be $30,000 for the new counters, but the guy who lives in a $500,000 house gets a $5,000 quote. Do you think that's the same or is it different? Or do you feel like that the counter guy's being a little unscrupulous?
No, I think that's the exact opposite. I think when people try to take advantage of, oh, you have more money, so I'm going to charge you more money. This is not that. Like you just said, it's the liability. You'd want us taking this more seriously than we would take a $200,000 deal. You want us to act accordingly. It's not quite the same in estate. So to draw that parallel, someone calls us and says, I have a $5 million estate, but it's deceased husband and the widow calls us and just needs us to do a simple probate of a will. We're not upcharging her for that. If it's very simple, it's very simple. Probating a will is probating a will. So we are not the people that are going to upcharge you and say, because your estate is worth more, we charge you more than the guy who has a $100,000 estate. A probate of a will is the same process. It's just the work on the back end. If it turns out that there's more to do in this $5 million estate, we're going to charge you accordingly. But base price, we treat everybody fair.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point on the estate because I did have a friend of mine passed away. He was an older gentleman, but he was a friend of mine. And I probated the estate of his widow for free. And she had received a quote for at the time, this was a while ago, for $5,000 and at the time we were charging a flat fee of $2,000 for probate's market rate. And when he found out that I was going to do it for free, he said, "Oh, I don't know, Mrs. Smith. This is a very sizable estate." And I thought that was incredibly dishonest. It was like a $2 million estate, not that sizable. I know 2 million seems like a lot, but I really did think that was dishonest for him to imply that there was more work. And there's certainly no more risk in my mind with probating a simple probate, whether it's 5 million or 2 million. Now, once you go over the taxable threshold, I suspect it does get a little more complex, but
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, let's go ahead and tackle our next question. What does title insurance cover and do I need it? Chris, you want to take a stab at that one?
Title insurance ensures you're buying a house free of encumbrances. Yes, you need it.
That's a very brass tacks way of saying it. I do agree with that. Mostly, it does ensure that the title is actually clear. It does there aren't previous tax liens on it. The person selling it to you really owns it. There aren't mechanics liens on it, things like that, or federal tax liens. So all kinds of stuff. And in the olden days, the way olden days before we had title insurance, you would have an attorney provide an opinion of title because title insurance did not exist. I think this is prior to 1920, so I'm going way back. And attorneys would give you an opinion, and that was their opinion. Now, it's different. That's different than insurance. An attorney can miss some, and you can say, go back to that attorney and be like, "Hey, you missed it. I'm going to file a claim against you, and I want you to pay me and turn it over to your malpractice." That's not exactly the same concept. An attorney is held to a reasonable professional standard. So let's say the attorney was issuing an opinion and something was missed because there was some misspelling of a name. That's not on the attorney. That attorney is going to say, well, I did a reasonable and prudent job in doing that review. I wasn't able to catch the fact that there was a lien filed against a name that had been misspelled or an FKA formerly known as name, something like that. Insurance is different in the sense that even if something was missed and there was a diligent professional standard done, the insurance policy is going to cover it. That's what insurance is. You pay them a premium, they have a risk pool. They're in the business of collecting more premiums than claims that they pay. And Chris, insurance companies are not fond of paying claims. They try anything they can to not pay. But Chris, how does that differ than casualty? A lot of people call us up, be like, "Hey, I don't need title insurance. I think the house is in good shape." How does that differ from casualty? I know it sounds funny, but we get that question a lot.
No, you're right. The title insurance is just that. If it turns out there's a lien on the property, then they're taking that responsibility. They're saying there are no liens. And if there are, we got to make it right. So either they have to go fight the liens, get them off the property, or pay them or compensate you if you have to pay them. So it's all about title. If someone comes in and says, no, you didn't buy this property from the owner, I was the owner and I'm still the owner. Again, the title company comes in and defends you or ultimately has to compensate you for your loss of title, which is different from casualty insurance, which is if your house burns down or a tornado takes your house. So they're two different types of insurance. Obviously, your homeowner's policy, you got to maintain year over year. Title insurance is I'm buying it now, knowing that everybody pays their premium to the title company. They're an insurance company. That's how they make money. They don't expect to have any loss. But if 1 out of 100 titles isn't clean and they have to defend it, that's what they're supposed to use their money for, their attorneys to help you clear.
Yep. Sounds good. I feel like we covered that question very thoroughly. Let's go ahead and move on to my favorite part of the show, our rant and rave section. AI, the usage rate on AI and ChatGPT has gone through the roof here recently in 6 months. I would say 6 months ago, if you asked a bunch of people in a room how many people were using AI, you'd probably get about 20%. Now, if you ask that question, you probably have 80, 90%. A lot of people use it, don't realize they're using it because they're using Google and they haven't connected AI overview yet. But a lot of just everyday people are using AI. And what we've noticed happening in this trend, Chris, is our clients are using AI generated emails. So they'll take whatever they want an update on their case and they'll put some facts in Chat GPT and say, now send an email to my lawyer saying I want this and support it with citations and arguments. and they'll just send us the AI email like they wrote it. And you can tell that it's AI generated because you start seeing emojis in the email because ChatGPT likes to generate emojis. And then the AI Gemini and ChatGPT does this as well. They insert little lines in between the paragraphs for some reason. And then you can also just tell that it's very densely constructed content where the client clearly couldn't write all of this. And then the concepts don't really work together. And sometimes the citations don't really make sense. What do you think about this trend? Have you seen this some going on here at the firm, or what do you think about it?
Yeah, I don't love it just because it seems to be more of a hindrance than anything. We love having educated clients. I definitely don't expect you to take my word as gospel, but if you're hiring me for my guidance, then how it goes. What I hate is if they say ChatGPT told me this, and then there's really no getting them off of it. That's a problem because now I'm having
Yeah.
to fight with AI that I can't fight with. I can't go talk to the AI.
So I've noticed, and I had a friend of mine at a big oil and gas company, and he was saying he went in. That's what when you're at a big company, Chris, you spend a lot of times going. Most of your day actually is in and out of meetings, just meeting after meeting.
Day.
Yeah. So he was going into a meeting with his supervisor, I guess the higher up GC at the big oil and gas company. And his supervisor had put a whole presentation and report together that the supervisor's really excited about. He distributes the report. And my friend realizes that this is all AI and he just checks out. So the humans are losing enthusiasm for digesting huge amounts of constructed material, is what I'm noticing, which is not good because the purpose of the written word is to communicate with somebody. And if your audience is checking out, that's not a good thing. I would also say a lot of this AI generated stuff ends up like a word salad. And if you don't really have complete control of the output and you don't know what the output, or you don't have complete understanding of the output and you don't know what the output is going to be, it's going to end up being a real problem. So I still think text generation has a huge place and time savings, but it has to be driven by an educated operator is where I'm coming down on. I use it all the time. I feel like it saves me hours, and I try to make it really short, really readable, and it's saving me the time of actually having to manually draft it. That's how I use it. Chris, have you been using it at all or not really?
Not one bit.
Is that just you just protesting? Oh, you don't
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not impressed. I don't believe it can save me time. Honestly, if AI generated an email or a pleading or correspondence, I would want to change it pretty significantly, I'm certain. So I don't need a jumping off point from a computer.
okay. A lot of people feel differently, and I certainly have adopted it. I think it's great for generating a lot of our type of content, which is we're not generating creative content. We're generating a lot of constructed content. You think about you remember the IRAC method from law school, Chris? So you spot the issue, you cite the rule, you do analysis, and you draw a conclusion. And within what we do, if you give it those parameters, you know what it's looking for. I think it's a great tool. I'll give you one example of how I used it the other day. I voice dictate a lot. I voice dictated into ChatGPT, uploaded a contract and said, "Hey, I represent the subcontractor. There's a non-solicitation clause in here. I believe it is the equivalent of a non-compete. Find the Texas Business and Commerce Code section that says that, cite that code section, and then I want you to argue that it is the non-solicitation clause is invalid based on a lack of consideration. And then furthermore, state that if it is valid, their liquidated damages clause is not enforceable because it's punitive, and cite those cases." It spit it out in a minute. It looked good. I sent it over to the associate. I said, "Now, because it has a tendency to hallucinate, you go check every citation and you read it and you make sure that it makes sense. So I thought that was a beautiful use. Did that persuade you, Chris, to adopt or no?
No, because you didn't tell me the end. Did they then have to spend 3 hours undoing the work? Because
My hope, I don't know. My hope is that they then spent that 3 hours. They spent about 30 minutes to an hour checking the citations and checking the law. Okay. That would be my hope. Where it would have taken longer to draft it. That's my hope. Still not a believer, huh?
because you also had to know exactly what to look for. So if you had not already built a base of knowledge and legal expertise, you wouldn't know to say, based on my expertise, I need you to look at this and this. So if a young associate's doing that, based on what you say, they're never learning, oh, there's a section in the Business and Commerce Code that governs these. Let me really familiarize myself with that. Let me read that code section 700 times over the course of my career and all cases pertaining to it so that I know and I have a full comprehension of the case history and how non-compete law has developed and changed over the last 20 years so that I can speak on it. Instead, I'm just going to have a computer draft some nonsense.
It would not have worked. It would not have worked if you're right. If you had no expertise and say we were a client and the client just uploaded the contract and said, make an argument that my non-compete is invalid, it probably would have spit out junk. So you have to know. That's why I say in the hands of an experienced user, it's a brilliant thing. That's my conclusion at this point. Chris disagrees. And that's where we got to end the show. So I've been your host, Phil Silverman. Chris Hill has been my co-host today. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. As a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@syllablelawfirm.com and tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great weekend.